you want to play some Tiny Leaders? Oh, no, I'm good. Hey man, you want to play some Tiny Leaders? I got a deck you can borrow. No, I'm good. I like playing with my own decks. Hey man, you want to play some Tiny Leaders? Really? Everyone seems to want to play. I guess I'll make one day. Yo, you want to play Tiny Leaders, man? Oh my gosh. Fine. Hey there, this is MTG Degree, my name is Luke, and today we're going to do a deck tech for Tiny Leaders. Now, this format's just gone crazy popular recently, so I decided it's finally time for me to build a deck. And in one of my recent videos, I said that you can save money by brewing your own decks. There's a lot of decks in Tiny Leaders that are sort of figured out or whatever, and they cost an arm and a leg and a heart and a soul and everything. They're just insanely expensive. So I decided to brew my own, and I'm doing an archetype that hasn't really been well visited as far as I'm concerned, which is Mill. Before we move on, there are a couple of things that I would like to sort of highlight about why I think that this format is really good for Mill. So the first thing is that in this format, you have a 50 card deck. One is off to the side, so 49, and then you draw 7. So there's only, basically, 42 cards that you have to mill. If the game goes on for a few turns, I mean it probably will, then even less. The next thing that really makes this a mill format, in my opinion, is that you start off with 25 life instead of 20. So you get to take maybe an extra attack, you know? So you get one more turn to mill, as compared to if you're trying to mill in Standard or Modern, you'd only have 20 life to kind of devote to this. And the last thing is that this format is designed to be fun! And there's nothing more fun than being annoyingly fun by milling out your opponents. So who's our fearless leader for this mill deck? Unfortunately, there's not really a mill legendary creature with converted mana cost 3 or less, so we just have to pick a leader that allows us to use the colors. So that is Sygg, River Cutthroat. So Sygg has kind of limited usefulness in this build, but what you can do is you can A, summon just to chump block. If you've got some extra mana, there's no reason not to just put that creature on the field so that you can slow them down while you're milling out their deck. And the other thing is if they happen to not pay attention and fetch and then shock themselves, then you get to draw a card. Alright, so let's talk creatures first. The first creature is Hedron Crabs, everyone's favorite crab. And this crab has landfall, and whenever you play a land, then your opponent mills the top 3 cards of their library. Our next creature is Ambassador Laquatus, and this Merfolk creature allows us to basically throw extra mana into milling cards off their deck. And eventually all of these creatures will probably end up being sacrificed just to chump block after they've done a little bit of milling. Merfolk Mesmerist is quite good. Basically you just sit there behind your Mesmerist. If you're not taking much damage, just sit there tapping it down, making them throw cards into the graveyard, and eventually the day will come when it has to chump block, and you'll block, tap, make them mill for the last time, and it'll say bye-bye. Returned Reveler is another good card, which basically you throw down on the field and you say, hey, maybe attacking me isn't such a good idea. The next card is Undercity Informer, and this is nice because if you draw a lot of your creatures, which are not your most efficient mill cards in this deck, then this turns them into mill powerhouses for a turn. Our next card is Jace's Archivist. So for 1 blue, you get a creature that can tap for 1 blue mana, make both people discard their hands, and then you both draw the amount of the highest hand. And by forcing both of you to draw and discard so much, you'll mill them out quite quickly. The last card is Riddlekeeper, and this guy is fantastic. Basically, he's just going to sit on the ground and punish them every time they attack you. The next category are artifacts. The first one is Shriekhorn. This is a 1 mana artifact, and basically over the course of 3 turns, it will mill them for 6. So 1 for 6, pretty good deal. The next card is Sands of Delirium. You put it down for 3 mana, And then after that point, every turn that you have extra mana, you can just throw it into the Sands of Delirium and mill them out as efficiently as possible. The last card is hilarious. It is Mesmeric Orb. So basically what this card does is every time anything untaps, the controller of the permanent that just untapped mills a card. So they want to untap their lands, which they're forced to do, by the way, then they better be throwing some cards into their graveyard. They want to attack you? Well, they're going to be milling themselves next turn. You'll also end up milling yourself, but this is fine because you are milling them, so your deck is going to last a hell of a lot longer than their deck will. The next card category that we're talking about are Planeswalkers, and here I only have one, and that is Ashiok, Nightmare Weaver. Basically, you're just going to sit there, plus, 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 and Ashiok does a great job of exiling cards, just like you want to do. And second of all, Ashiok can minus and give you a bit more of a ground game so that you can slow down anything that's coming at you too quickly. Our next category I'm just going to call spells because it's got sorceries, instants, and enchantments. And this is the real juicy, meaty part of this deck list. Alright, so the first one is Visions of Beyond. Basically, we're getting Ancestral Recall here. How many times in your game is your opponent going to have 20 cards or more in their graveyard? A lot. The next card is Pilfered Plans. Even our card draw mills our opponent. This fits right in. And speaking of cards that are annoying for our opponent, and then even more annoying for our opponent, we have Psychic Strike. We get to counter one of their good spells, and we mill them for 2. Sounds like a deal to me. Our next card, Muddle the Mixture, continues this theme of cards that are both strong and versatile for us. So this card will counter an instant or sorcery spell, or you can transmute it for 3, which means that you get to basically tutor up anything that costs 2. A lot of our very powerful mill spells cost 2. Our next card is Mystical Tutor. Since this is a singleton format, some spells will be stronger than others. We can't always run playsets of everything here. So, what we've done is we've thrown in a Mystical Tutor, that way we can get our most powerful spells that we've got. Alright, so now we move on to our more spicy spells, the ones that only mill our opponent. The first one is Tome Scour. For 1 blue, they throw 5 cards in the graveyard. So the next card is Brain Freeze. What Brain Freeze does is it makes your opponent mill 3 cards, but this card also has Storm. So for every instant or sorcery cast before it on this turn, they mill an additional 3. Curse of the Bloody Tome puts some inevitability into our plan. Every upkeep, they mill 2 cards. Our next card is Memory Erosion, and this fits right in with Curse of the Bloody Tome. Basically, you're enchanting them, and you're saying, every time you cast a spell, throw 2 cards in your graveyard. Sorry about that, buddy. Alright, well now we're entering the spicy spells. The first one is Glimpse the Unthinkable. Very simple, 1 blue, 1 black. They mill the top 10 cards of their library. Yeah. Our next card is Increasing Confusion. For 1 X, you tell your opponent, put the top X cards of your library into your graveyard. Not bad. Not as efficient as Glimpse the Unthinkable, but quite good. Where it gets really spicy is after it's in your graveyard, then if you flash it back, then your X is multiplied by 2. So you pay 6 mana, they mill 10. So a spell that you get to use more than once is nice. Our next card is Mind Funeral. For 1 black and blue, your opponent reveals cards off the top of their library until they reveal 4 lands. Then they take all that stuff and they throw it in the graveyard. Mind Grind is Mind Funeral with X. Basically, you decide by how much you're spending on mana, how many lands they have to reveal before they're done milling themselves. The next card is Mind Sculpt. For 1 and a blue, they take the top 7 cards of their library, just throw it in the graveyard. Our next card is Shared Trauma, which is another X spell, and basically however much mana you put into it, you mill them and yourself for that much minus 1, because it costs 1 black before the X. Our next card is Psychic Drain. So this is pretty exciting. What you do is you spend 1 blue, 1 black, and X. You mill them for X, and you gain X life, which is really important because mill decks don't have a good way of defending themselves. So just gaining life by milling them is awesome. The next card is the breaking half of Breaking and Entering. You pay 1 blue, 1 black, and they take the top 8 cards of their library, throw them in the graveyard. Dream Twist is up next, and that's pretty nice. Basically, for 1 blue, you mill them for 3. Then when you've got some extra mana up, you can spend 2 and mill them for an additional 3. The last spell I'll be talking about is Twincast. Do you happen to have Twincast and a Glimpse the Unthinkable in your hand? Alright, so let's talk mana base. The first 2 cards are Duskmantle, House of Shadow, and Nephalia Drownyard. These 2 cards basically just allow us to take extra mana if we don't have any mana sinks, and just throw them into the land and cause them to mill a card. The next 2 cards play pretty well with Hedron Crab, the first one being our simple Polluted Delta, and the second one being Obero, Palace in the Clouds. So basically with Obero, you can keep on spending a mana to pop it back into your hand, pop it back down, Hedron Crab super happy. The last utility land I want to talk about is Shelldock Isle. And basically this taps for 1 blue, it comes into play tapped, and when it comes into play you look at the top 4 cards of your library. You pick one, probably a mill spell, and you put it under the land. The other ones you put on the bottom of your library. Then, once they have 20 or less cards in their library, which is going to happen, then you get to cast that card for free. So it's basically like draw a card. Our regular old mana fixers are Temple of Deceit, Dismal Backwater, Crumbling Necropolis, Darkslick Shores, Underground River, 2 swamps, and 6 islands. Now, some of you may have noticed a problem with this deck, and I will address it right now. And that problem is that Breaking and Entering has a red mana symbol on it. And one of our lands has a red mana symbol on it. So you can't play those, says the most diehard people. And I sympathize with that. But at the same time, I think at many of your stores, nobody will really mind, you know? It's just a budget option. However, you can do 2 things to fix this problem. 1, take them out. And 2, you can buy Tetsuo Umezawa. So this card will cost you a clean $45, but it is a legendary commander that you can use that is blue, black, red. I personally will be playing Sygg River Cutthroat because it costs less money, and I think at most of the time people won't really mind that you have something that technically breaks the rules even if you're not even casting it. As with all sideboards, your sideboard will depend on what's going on at your card shop. So I'm not really going to tell you what to put in it. However, one card that was so tempting to put in the main board and might actually belong there is Crypt Incursion. So what it does is at instant speed, you gain 3 life for every creature in your opponent's graveyard, and they are exiled. This card might make the cut because it allows you to gain so much life over all this milling, and therefore you'll be able to stay alive for a bit longer and mill them out. Now the cost for this deck is budget as far as I'm concerned. Tiny Leaders has ended up being a pretty darn expensive format actually. So the total cost for the deck on TCG Player is about $130 as of now. Now if $130 is too high for you, there are 3 cards that are somewhat egregious offenders in the price range, and if you cut them out you can save yourself $60. So the first one is Ashiok, Nightmare Weaver. She is $16. Then there is Glimpse the Unthinkable, which is one of our really powerful mill spells, so I'd be sad to take it out. But it does cost almost $25. And the last one is Polluted Delta, which costs about $14. I will admit that I do not think that this is a Tier 1 powered deck. It's probably Tier 2. But what I do think is that it is extremely fun and budget friendly. And for those reasons, I don't see why I wouldn't build it. I personally already have these cards on order. So, what did you guys think about the deck? Are there any cards that you would like to add or remove? Go ahead and sound off in the comments. If you enjoyed this deck tech with me today, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. This has been MTG Degree, my name is Luke, and I'll see you guys next video.